Last week, we celebrated our ancestors' deliverance from slavery. Last week in Torah, we went free. But this week, we arrive at Mount Sinai, and the Ten Commandments are uttered by God amidst fire and lightning and thunder and shofar blasts. This week, we become a people bound by Torah. But there is something odd about the way that events unfold. Before we stand at Sinai and receive our code of law, we receive judges. We would expect it to be the opposite. We would expect first laws and only then judges. So why this reverse order? The Torah is telling us, don't underestimate the role of judges. They are as important as revelation. Laws, no matter how well written, and we assume God did a very good job, but these laws exist at the whims of the people who will interpret and enforce them. And this is perhaps why Moses felt he had to do all of this work himself. Why perhaps he feared that the damage the wrong kind of person in this role might do to that law. So what makes for a good judge? Judaism gives us two answers. The first one comes from this Torah portion, where we are told what kind of a person is suitable. Judges should be anshe emet, truthful. They should be sonei vatza, people who hate bribes, who will act beyond suspicion or reproach. They should be yirei Elohim, God-fearing. What does that mean? Well, the midwives in Egypt are famously called God-fearing when they disobey Pharaoh's edict to murder Israelite newborn children. So a God-fearing person, we intuit, is a person who will not kowtow to kings or bend justice to serve human ends. And finally, judges should be anshe chayil. Our commentators understand that to mean a strong person who can withstand the pressures of the job, but also those who seek to influence them. These are people who feel no need to flatter the powerful or court their interests. And the second answer about what makes a good judge is not a list of character traits. It's a mindset. The sages of the Talmud gave us what I call the Leviticus 18:5 test. They noted that in Leviticus 18:5, God says to us, "You shall keep my laws and statutes, that in the pursuit of them you shall live." And the sages infer that when we approach Jewish law, we must remember we live by these laws. We do not die for them. So when in doubt, we must read these laws as life-giving, life-affirming, life-saving. The Leviticus 18:5 test demands that a judge in Israel ask, as they prepare to rule on a matter, what is happening in the world? What would I expect the outcomes of this ruling to be? What is the situation for those who will be affected? The classic Talmudic example you may have heard of. One of the Ten Commandments says that we must remember Shabbat, keep it holy, and do no work at all. The rabbis ask, but what if someone is dying? Do we say, "I'm sorry, it's Shabbat, I can't work to save you"? No, I can see many of you mouthing that to yourselves. No, we don't. A judge in Israel knows that God gave us these laws so that we might live by them, not die for them. The Leviticus 18:5 test is vital. It's vital because in a vacuum, it would be intellectually justifiable to read the law and argue that we can let someone die so that we could keep Shabbat. But such a reading would be a perversion of Judaism and Shabbat. Such a judge would be deciding the law without any care for what happens as a consequence of their ruling. Our judicial mindset, live by them, don't die for them, is the secret to how we've kept our ancient legal code relevant, meaningful, and vital in each generation. It is the way Torah was able to live and grow through the ages. Judges who read the statutes to give the law and the people new life. Maimonides sums up this mindset perfectly. Reflecting on Leviticus 18:5, he says, "The laws of the Torah are not meant to wreak vengeance upon the world, but to bestow upon it mercy, kindness, and peace." This mindset is exactly what we see missing in so much of our nation's jurisprudence today. I shake when I think of some of the judges who have been set over us. It's bad enough that our judges are writing falsehoods into their opinions. So much for anshe emet. And it's bad enough that billions upon billions of undisclosed dark money flows in and out of our judicial system. So much for sonevatza. It's bad enough that judges allow themselves to be courted and wined and dined and given so-called hospitality from many moneyed interest groups. So much for anshe chayil and yirei Elohim. Each of these practices are undermining our faith in our judges and the law. But nothing is more damaging than the faction of our judiciary whose stated goal is to segregate themselves from the real-life consequences of their decisions. Too many judges do not care if their opinions wreak vengeance upon the world. They claim time and again their job is merely to expound the law. The outcomes aren't their purview. They elevate the words of the law above the lives of those of us living under it when they do so. The most recent example among a litany comes just this week. 3 federal appeals court judges overturned a statute that barred people with domestic abuse restraining orders from possessing a firearm. This was a common sense law. We know that an abuser's access to guns makes it five times more likely that a woman will be killed. When we used to read the names of mass shooting victims on this bima at Kaddish, I got into the habit of searching the internet for the names to find out more about what had happened. And the number of times I found an article about a man killing his wife or girlfriend and then their children was staggering. It was most of the time. So why would these judges overturn a 30-year-old statute that protected victims of domestic violence? A recent Supreme Court decision established a new legal test. Any gun regulations need to have historic analogs to the 18th century. So these 3 federal judges point out that in the 18th century there were no rules disarming domestic abusers. Of course, the absence of such an analog might be because it was legal to beat your spouse in the 18th century and that women didn't have equal rights. But that doesn't matter. The law must be read in their chosen vacuum. And if people die, and should this ruling be allowed to stand, people will die. That's not any of their business. These laws are so important, they are willing to sacrifice your life. They insist we must die for them. This week, the Israelites pick out their best to be their judges. God will not, in fact, reveal the law until this is done. These judges, truthful, upstanding, impervious to pressure, coercion, and bribery, are given one charge by our tradition: to ensure the Torah's laws serve to bless the lives of those who live by them. God knows that judges with the proper mindset are the only way for Torah to live eternally with the people, to make sure that in each and every generation we say, Na'aseh v'nishma, all of God's laws we will do and we will understand, rather than to simply walk away from the covenant. So as our republic struggles, and as our democracy is threatened, and as the rule of law is undermined, we must find the judges, the judges who care about the consequences of their rulings, who love the citizenry as much as they love the law, who serve the people, not just the powerful, and who will interpret our laws in a way that lets them speak to our most dire needs. So in states where we can vote for our judges, we must go out and vote. I'm talking especially to our friends in Wisconsin right now. And we must write letters to the states where they are elected so that we can support that effort. We must donate to these campaigns. And in communities and in election cycles, when we can't vote directly for judges, we have to start remembering judges are still on the ballot. We will decide who appoints them. Maybe we won't choose their names. We won't get to vote for them directly, but we will decide their mindsets and their ethos as we select our representatives. So as we go forward, we, like Judaism asks us to do, can apply our Leviticus 18:5 tests to our judges and to our would-be judges. We ask ourselves, will they read and interpret the law for the sake of our lives, or serve up our lives for the sake of the law?